Manish Chakraborti. He's a professor in architecture and conservation architect. He's the director of Continuity, founded in 2000, which is one of the leading historic building consultants. He has also worked as a consultant to World Monuments Fund, National Museum of Denmark, Asian Development Bank, and Archaeological Survey of India. He has been awarded fellowship from the Charles Wallace Geothe Institute, Italian Government and Cultural Heritage Agency of the Netherlands. Recently, he was honored by Society Interiors for his project on conservation of St. Olav Church, India, that won the UNESCO Asia Petition. And thank you everyone else for joining this session. I see a lot of people who have joined from outside of our database. Or outside of a student body, which means that they are really interested in this session. So let's start it, sir.
Yes. Thank you, Mom. Thank you for the introduction.
Thank you so
much. May I ask you, so a lot of people joined and I cannot see it properly, but thank you very much for your introduction, and I go straight. I would like to interact with the people who are participating today. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. I go straight without any further delay because technology can be very risky at times. So I don't know when technology will betray us. So I will not waste any time to start my presentation. Well, many of you know me and many of you don't know me. I'm Manish Chakraborti. I have been consistently practicing architecture and conservation with a focus on conservation. And I'm going to show you my concern, which kind of drives me to be into this particular profession, which I think is also like architecture, has got a tremendous joy of creation. When you're conserving something, you're also actually making that building live for many more years to come. So it's creating, also making it live for many more years to come, like architecture, which get built and it kind of gives enjoyment and usability and benefits to the people who uses it. And so I see a lot of kind of commonality between architecture. I say this in particular because there is no apparent contradiction between architecture and conservation. In order to conserve old buildings, you need to be an architect or an engineer and many other professions, of course, which actually is a collaborative work that goes into conserving a building. Our historic urban districts are under tremendous pressure of space, and this pressure, I don't know, maybe it is out of pressure that is being very created pressure or not, but often under this pressure of unprecedented growth and requirement for space, for development, in infrastructure, we have been very constantly destroying our existing buildings. We have done that historically. In Dalhousie Square, we see that Dalhousie Institute on the right bottom, and that was a wonderful building that was there in the early 19th century, which was only replaced by Telephone Bhavan in that same location. And that axis that I show on the map is an axis between the Governor House and the Writers' Building, and the Telephone Bhavan, that tall, big Telephone Bhavan, came right bang on to disturb that axis. We have been not very happy with the size of the building. We needed more, and we broke the Bank of Bengal, which was earlier called the Imperial Bank. And while this bank was getting demolished, I was in Scotland, and my good friend Craig Wilson was very proudly showing me Bank of Scotland. So we built in its place this kind of a building. Some arches trying to say that it's we have been very sensitive about our architecture, but it's actually very cliche and pastiche to begin with. We have also not spared our educational institution. This was the Senate Hall on College Street, and we broke this building and we built that university building in its place, which we all know. And that's the kind of architecture that we built in the place of the Senate Hall. And we have been constantly doing this, which has been another destruction in College Street. That used to be a wonderful College Street market, which got demolished, which was very sound and working perfectly all right for the people. And the whole idea was to make another market with books and other shops. So another building was proposed called Borno Porichoy in its place, which never actually took place, and now it kind of stands unexposed, partly broken, partly incomplete, and so on. This was designed by a very blue-eyed boy of the developer from Mumbai called Hafiz Contractor. And I don't know why he had to conceive a proportion and form like this, which has no bearing on Calcutta's character and architecture. To me, the building seems to be gripped by profit, motivated, greedy, developmental initiative. And the city seems to be constantly under sail. We are constantly sailing our city at the expense of losing our character and deteriorating our city's conditions. The destruction has been primarily caused by development and infrastructure. There has been other human activities that destroy it, and also the management and legal issues, which kind of doesn't give enough protection for the conservation or retention or protection of these buildings. So in this presentation of mine today, I would like to kind of try to show my projects that I worked on and how we can do a paradigm shift from this, which the developer call as a liability and therefore they had to go, into an asset. How to demonstrate that these buildings can also perform today's functions, today's economics, and so on and so forth. And we talk about what are the principles and methods and protocols for conservation, because that has to be known, because it is very important that we know the nuances, the technicalities about conserving a building, instead of just saying that we are doing a developmental work and we are doing conservation. And so it is very important to know what are the principles and methods and protocols for conservation before we kind of talk about marriage of conservation and development. So in this presentation, we would like to talk about the conservation principles, and we talk about the conservation projects, and kind of drive home the idea that a conservation is another form of development. What are the guiding principles in conservation of built heritage? We have to kind of respect, when we look at a building which we want to conserve, we want to look at the documentary evidence that we can find. It should be based on historic documentation. What are the evidences? What are the features which gives it significance, which enables it for people to like it? And how the building has evolved. Every building, if you look at a building of say 200 years, a lot of additions goes on into a building. and respect for the building's history. We do not restore to only one period, because a building gets changed and adapted over a period of time of its existence. And we should, when we restore a building, we should be able to say that this is my new work, and so that people can distinguish what was the original old fabric or old material of the building and what is the new material, expression of the new material. There's nothing to hide there. It has to be legible. People who hide are people who are imperfect, people who had to do other means in their daily lives as well. Respect for historic material is very important, that all these buildings were built with a particular kind of material like lime, brick dust, and so on and so forth. So using similar materials if they are conceivable or available, or using compatible material wherever it is possible. And respect for the original fabric, repair with like materials. And when we have understand the maintenance is a very important aspect which we need to learn from perhaps many of the settlements of ordinary poor houses, tribal houses. They constantly maintain their house. The notion of maintenance is actually very much absent we as a nation. We as a nation has a very least understanding. We understand the maintenance of a refrigerator. We understand the maintenance of our air conditioners, but we don't understand the annual maintenance contract of our buildings. So therefore, any conservation action should have, from these many principles, should have basic three principal tenets. Whatever we do to a building to make it live for another 100 years to the future, it has to be minimal and essential. The word essential is very important, because essential, you can only find out what is essential only when you know the building through and through. You know the building very thoroughly. You do all kinds of research, of documentation, try to understand the history of the building, try to understand the changes that have occurred in the building. So to do essential and to be as minimal as possible, and to be compatible in your approach, be it in material, be it in your design. And you have to, whatever you do today should not preclude the next generation to do a better job than you. So it should be reversible. So if you're adding a new thing to an old building, ensure or try to ensure that the building that you're doing today, tomorrow somebody comes in and says, no, you have not followed the principle. We would like to do it in this way, which is much more sounder in theory and understanding. So it can be unbolted. In conservation works, therefore, it becomes very imperative, it's very essential that we know a detailed understanding of the building that we are restoring before we specify and undertake any works. And for that, we prepare a conservation plan. We call it a conservation plan, and it's nothing but a reference document which kind of talks about what is the condition, what is the documentation, what are the condition survey, which pipes are not behaving properly, which part of the roof is leaking, and so on and so forth. So it's a kind of a very detailed understanding of the building before you start. What is the material of its brick mortar, and so on and so forth. What was the original color, to do some paint analysis to know the original color, and then only then start specifying the works that needs to be taken up. So it is actually a reference document that you create before you actually touch, before you actually intervene to an old building. This was my first project that I did about 20 years ago. I'm very attached to this building. And that is the house of Bidyasagar in North Calcutta. And it was in a very dire strait, in a very bad condition, with a lot of intermediate repairs, which were not done in compatible material, in so on and so forth. So wherever the repair which was done, the money was spent in repairing it, was actually giving way much faster, deteriorating much faster, because the compatibility was at question. So this was the house. It was a two-storied, rather relatively large house. I never realized that Vidyasagar could have such a big, rather colonial, standalone bungalow building for himself. But this was his fifth building, because by the time he came to this building, he had 35,000 books, and he, prior to this, he was living in all tenanted accommodation in Bara Bazar, in North Calcutta, parts of North Calcutta, before he took permission from his father to buy this house. And this is where all his relatives and friends from Midnapur used to come to Calcutta and stay on the ground floor, while he used to stay on the first floor. This was under tremendous litigation when I went in, and the government of West Bengal, the then time, paid a huge amount of cost to fight the case against the tenants, and actually make them recover the building for its reuse. Department of Higher Education gave money for its repair, and we kind of studied the building, we repaired it with the same material, and so on and so forth. Wherever we were removing this members of the supporting roof, if we generally, the erosion takes place at the bearing portion at the two ends of the walls of these beams. If you cut the remaining bearing portion, which inserts about, say, 6 inches into the wall, which gets corroded and cannot take the load any further, if you cut it, it becomes short of the span. So either you add another piece, bolt it nicely, and you reuse it, or look for another space which has got a lesser span, where this particular recovered wooden beam can be reused. So it's a kind of a judicious choice, and you can only do that provided you know each and everything about that building. So this was restored. We only had a little portion of the middle portion of the cast iron grill. We got it manufactured and continued the entire stretch of the balcony, and it goes very well with the architecture of the surrounding buildings. As you can see, the neighboring buildings with the same kind of cast iron grills. So it doesn't say that look at me, and it kind of synthesizes very perfectly, and it kind of sits very well within the locality. And the louvers that is also there in the neighboring buildings were also added on with this stained glass made by one of my very close friend called Tondra Chondo, who did this stained glass on the louvers of the veranda of Vidyasagar. So that was the reversal that we could achieve in a very short period of time at a very low cost. It was roughly around 10,000 square feet, 5,000 square feet, and the total cost was about 10 lakhs. So it was about 500 rupees per square foot. So conservation is viable. You can actually don't discount an old building saying that it is not useful anymore. It can be more advantageous, more less expensive to give it a life for many more years to come. So that's the bit of a fact file. The total area was about 5,000 square feet. It took about 11 months, and including electricity and plumbings, it was 15 lakhs. I've done many other residential buildings, and this is an interesting building that was about to be destroyed by a very big corporate who runs the tea company called Goodrick Tea. And we restored this building. It was about 5,000 in each floor, which is double the size of Vidyasagar. And the corporate heads realized It's still a company which is 51% owned by a English company called Camellia PLC, and while the group is as a whole is an Indian company, and so the group chairman comes 3 or 4 times a year with his other higher officials, and they generally put up in Grand Hotel for a consecutive 7-10 days. So it was the group chairman's decision in the UK to restore this building instead of building another building, which would not have been possible to build as one on the right hand side so big. And we restored it, and he need not go and stay in Grand Hotel. He can stay here and entertain as well. So we kind of restored the staircase, which was lying in a shamble. It was kind of opened, and largely the roof was not there. So we continued the same method of construction, but we didn't use wood. We used steel, and we used the arresters, so that and on the top of that we used wooden beams, wooden runners, and on the top of that we use tiles. And these arresters are so that the tiles do not move from each other's positions, and that we could create the inside so beautifully and so aesthetically that it is a wonderful space that gets regenerated much better than the suite of much better and bigger and spacious than the Grand Hotel rooms. So this became a master bedroom, and this balcony became beautifully done with an outdoor space, with a non-air conditioned space that was purposely kept as a non-air conditioned. Learning and practicing the principles is much easier on a building which is not under pressure of development. One such form of buildings are churches. Nobody destroys a church, or for that matter any religious buildings. So I was very fortunate to be in a position to restore many churches, one even in England, and that really helped me to work with the principles more closely, and not get what should I say, not get carried away by the argument of developmental pressure. Like this was the first cathedral of Calcutta, St. John's Church. It was very bad. It was getting very deteriorated and bad in condition. The trees were looming large over the steeple. So the World Monuments Fund gave us a very discreet amount, very small amount of $75,000 10 years ago, and we restored the outside, including the steeple. So we cleaned it as much with a lot of dilution of the chemical that we used, and so that the decoloration of the stone doesn't happen, and we could manage to get the building in a much more pristine form without any additions and alterations, using compatibility, being very minimal, and so on. And that was the interior of the St. James Church, which was a lot of rising damp that you can see, and that was addressed very effectively by draining and by injecting chemicals, primarily the silicones, and create a hydrophobic zone, because the old buildings do not have a plinth protection that we generally give for new buildings. So you need to create a post-construction plinth, which is nothing but a hydrophobic layer, which doesn't allow the water rising from the soil to climb beyond a certain height. And that was created a very beautiful space at a very, very modest prices and cost. And that is very important to note, particularly at this time of the year, at this time of the crisis that we are going in. We need to really weigh our options in terms of costing, and then that will lead us to think alternatives of how to do things how to do a thing in a much more judicious way. So that was kind of revived everybody. I really was bombarded with a lot of congratulation notes from both the schools on either side of this church, which was Pratt Memorial and St. James School, and actually these two schools contributed for the construction of the St. James Church. So they were all very, very pleased that they could see once again in its former glory the St. James Church, to which they are so intimately attached. Let us go a little further upstream from Calcutta. That's the wonderful river Hooghly, a part of River Ganga, with all the mills that dotters all around. And I was very fortunate to work on a very long-term planning with the National Museum of Denmark. And we worked on two very significant projects with the National Museum of Denmark, West Bengal Heritage Commission, and the district magistrates of the Hooghly for restoration of a very significant church, which we managed to then benchmark conservation, not only in the context of the country, India, but in the context of the South Asia, for which we have been awarded by the UNESCO for conservation of the St. Olav Church, of the 210 years old St. Olav Church, which wins the UNESCO award in 2016. So we all might know this church. It's a very important church. It was very important from the point of view of colonial history, of European history on the bank of the river Hooghly, and this was the part by the Danish, and it was kind of restored in its full authenticity because once again there was no pressure that you have to do something, additions, and increase the space, and contested by silly demands of silly demands, occasionally silly demands of more developmental space. And that was in the primary days, it used to actually stand at a very important location of the town, and that is about 200 years old. Spire. The spire is little more than the width of the church, so that it can be actually viewed by the English who were on the other side of the river in Barrackpore, which contributed, the English contributed the Danes for making the spire a little taller. So we had great difficulty in actually reaching out and repairing and painting the spire. So that was the condition. Here also the roof collapsed partly and the church was closed. So we had to recover the church, and we had to bring the church back to. And the space of the church was also a very important space for social mixing. And because Serampore has got a lot of different cultural denominations and religious people from religious denominations, and this church was very important for all of them during the time of the Christmas festival and Easters and so on. So this was, and the original bell tower on the rooftop, which was all, so it was in a very bad condition. You can see how the sheer crack of the capital of the column was taking place, how the beams were bending, how partly the roof was collapsed, and these freestanding columns, magnificent, majestic columns, were giving way. And we did a huge analysis of the mortar and the tiles and the wooden beams. And we did an analysis. These are the mortar samples that we collected. We also did a understanding of the paint analysis to know what was the original color of the paint before, and then applied, then did the specification. And you can see there was a little bluish tinge on the lime wash that we used inside. This was found to be the original original color from our paint analysis. And the roof was constructed and repaired in the same traditional way of lime, shuki, and brick bats, and beating them on a regular basis till you attain a sound of a metal, and so on and so forth. And this was beautifully kind of restored in parts, and you know, the construction of the earlier was much more modular and much better to repair. And that's how that haystacks on the top of the roof that we restored is a very traditional method of curing our roof, because we shouldn't just cure by flooding it with water. We should ensure that the water which is used for curing the roof, a newly made roof, should be done in a very slow, progressive way, and straw helps to retain that progression. So that was the condition. It was kind of reversed, and it was beautifully enjoyed by all the people who saw the whole process of restoration, which took about 2 years, and it was a big celebration. People from all walks of life, at the day of the inauguration, came forward and really celebrated, including that Mashi, who painstakingly cleans the building even today. This was a very important building. This was a ruinous building. PWD said no to this building. The government of West Bengal were planning to do some other things, and we reversed the ruin into a profitable venture. This was a tavern built in 1790, and it also, like any other building, as I said, went into a tremendous changes, and it was changed beyond recognition, with a lot of debris, a lot of roofs collapsed, and it was kind of a view of a ruin that was never thought that it will ever be of any use. And it created a lot of delinquency around that environment. People used to do all kinds of mischief in and around that place, and it sets in a lot of social evils that around a bad, ruinous environment. And that exactly was the reason we slowly started uncovering and started looking for references, evidences, and features of the building by slowly and gradually, and we managed to even excavate to know the foundation, to kind of tie together like a jigsaw puzzle of what was the original form of the building. And we could gather all these informations. We could research into the library in Copenhagen, in Denmark, which has kept meticulously the documentation of this building. And we all worked together, the police, the department, INTAC, National Museum of Denmark, and everybody, the local councillor, everybody kind of took that as their own personal project. And of course, the craftsmen who were employed to do about 1.5 crore worth money was spent on the woodwork, which was all done and slowly and gradually we could get the original form, and slowly and beautifully this original form. The only change that we did was in the middle. This was a wooden floor, and we felt there was another room after this central hall, and we thought that we should make this central portion, a part of the central portion, open up. So we created an inside balcony like our coffee house, and we thought of using this building as a restaurant and a cafe as well. So we continued the same function. We thought of a compatible function of its reuse, and we converted that into a cafe, and it was the upper floor. So that's the portion that we did, and we used all original lime water and lime plaster, and that was a huge on the day of the inauguration. Everybody wanted to go in. It was a kind of a revival of what they never ever thought, that it can come to this level of use and action. And so that was the balcony, and it sits right in front of the river. So all these people are experiencing the river from the balcony on the first floor. And that's been, now currently this building is being operated by the Park Hotel. It's owned by the tourism department. So there are 6 rooms on the upper floor, and the ground floor is occupied by the cafe, and it's beautifully running, and there's a bakery by the Fleuries on the ground floor at the far corner. And that's the river, and that's the building. So it's kind of complete revival where a lot of rapport building could be achieved. A lot of people realized that breaking a building is not the only solution. Reusing a building could be. So it gave a lot of confidence, not only to the local people, but among the government, among the private, that it is possible to restore and to put back into and repurpose into a building, which we can then reuse and benefit and make the project more sustainable financially, culturally, educationally. We come to the last few slides of coming back to Calcutta, working on a very difficult project of just besides the Marble Palace. And that was the building, which was, many of you all might have seen it. I am presenting it for the first time. Miss Imami Group actually started their journey with a very little 35,000 rupees. They were tenants in this building, and that 35,000 turned into 35,000 crore company, one of the top 10 companies in the country in terms of turnovers. So they were original tenant. They finally bought it, and I got a call from Imami saying that Manish Babu, would you be interested in? And I wasted no time. I quickly went there, and it all went. So when I walked into 48B, Muktaram Babu Street, you know, what appeals to me is the proportion of these buildings. What appeals to me is the traditional methods that still survives much more number of years than new methods of construction, unfortunately. Robustness of the building. It has got a presence. Old buildings has a fantastic presence, and it evokes in you a sense of awe and respect. And that really attracts you, that really pulls you towards itself. So we kind of converted. And we added, we had a lot of requirement to meet, and so on. And we did, while we were changing, while we were increasing space, we were conscious about the methods of restoration. We were conscious about the protocols of restoration. And that's the transformation that we did, which were based on documentary evidence, which was based on all the principles that I talked about before. And we drew the plan, and we kind of added the upper floor, which is recessed back because the porch extends in front, which actually cannot be viewed very properly by a man's height when you are standing in front of the building. So this is a little video of that building, which kind of explains what all we did. We are standing in front of a 150 years old building in Calcutta. When I first entered this building, it was decayed all over. As you enter the building, the tall columns of the entrance porch stand all alone by themselves. The roof collapsed. All the roofs of these floors were collapsing, on the verge of collapsing. The entire courtyard in the center was full of debris and a big shed. The temple besides it was almost a complete go down. The building was not in use for over 2 decades. But this building was very significant. It was subsequently being taken over in the 60s by Imami, from where the entire journey of Imami Group and the success story started. The project started with detailed documentation of the building. We documented every floor. We documented every room. We documented the structural system. We tried to find out what were the architectural significant elements that the building still reveals. We revealed the original details of the columns. We revealed the cast iron brackets that was there on the front of the porch. We revealed kind of grills, the kind of wooden beams and borgas, their sizes and proportions. We traced the cornices in order to establish the sizes and the proportion of the roofs. We tried to reveal the original building layout. We tried to reveal the original form of the building. They wanted to restore the building. They wanted to keep the temple in the form of a temple. They wanted to put the rest of the spaces into their philanthropic activities. This is the house from where they started the journey of Imami Group. They wanted to give back to the city. They wanted to give to the city something for which the people benefits. We retrofitted the building without changing the facade of the building. We added another floor without having any impact on the front facade of the building. We inserted the original balcony in the front by looking at the size and shape of the brackets, the surviving brackets of the building. We were honest to the size and proportion. We were honest to the method of construction. The restoration of 48B Muttaram Babu Street demonstrates that heritage conservation is not a liability and endorses the fact that it can be made use of and repurposed to make it more socially relevant all over again. So it was restored. If you go now, you will see this. It happened only just before the closure for COVID. So many people have not perhaps seen it after. I have not also seen it for the last 2 months. But it was based on 4 pillars, the use. They used their corporate social responsibility funds to use this building for the spirituality, which is the temple. They use the different rooms for various courses and trainings that they give for women's empowerment, like Shelai, like tailoring and so on. They give education for chartered accountancy, and of course they are into healthcare in the city. So they also have a referral center that is given for the people who doesn't have, unfortunately, who are more less advantaged than many of us. And it actually, it's the 48B property is more than just another repurposed property. Therefore, it represents almost perhaps a marriage, a model that is responsible, that heritage innovation is possible and combined and argued that it can be put to commercial, financial sustainability. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for your wonderful session.
Thank you. So can we have some questions?
Well, Manish, good
Pradeep ji.
afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
My name is Konal Shannal. I am a heritage enthusiast, totally amateur. My training and job doesn't require me to acquire any knowledge about heritage whatsoever.
Right.
But we sort of bumped into each other some 15 years back while roaming the streets in North Calcutta.
Right.
Of course, you won't remember me because both of us used to look much younger those days, you know.
Right.
So my question is, what's your take on the socio-economic challenges that face proper restoration of old family buildings, which we see of so many in North Calcutta?
You see, I try to give a presentation based on the works that I've done, but I'm aware that social considerations often in order to restore a building, you have to remove a lot of people from. Are you asking that?
Socio-economic, yes.
Yeah. So
What are the challenges that one or you might have faced,
yeah,
while trying to restore an old heritage?
I try to say that in many words, that often buildings, old buildings, however beautiful they may be, often get discounted because they cannot. The argument that is put forth is that they are not economically sustainable. So what I'm trying to say that they are, and the government can only create enabling policies that if somebody is having followed, it's very important to realize that you cannot mess around with the protocols for conservation because you're doing an economic activity, right? And so I think having met the conservation methods and protocols, you should be able to demonstrate economic feasibility and economic sustainability and social inclusion. There are abundant of such cases all over the world, which has done, and so India and Calcutta is beginning to kind of grasp that idea. So there are a lot of sensitive developers and conscious people like you who will be able to meet this challenge and bring about a better, equitable environment.
Okay, let's hope for the best.
Yeah.
Hello, Manish.
Yes. Sai
Yes.
from Bangladesh.
Yeah. I am sorry that I am late little for registration and
I didn't show my Bangladesh proposal.
Yeah.
I will show perhaps next year.
Yeah, that I think that I joined with some curiosity and just to having a status of an observer only, not
Wow.
much more about the Calcuttan experience. But I've seen a lot, and I have also seen it in February in a workshop that you have done here also.
Yes, I gave a talk. You were there. Yes.
Yeah. I was there, and I think you will have your idea of reusing the repurposing of the heritage. This is a new theme I could see, and there are a lot of potentials inside also in Bangladesh as well, but it needs a lot of awareness as well.
Yeah. Awareness.
Because people are already suffering. The people who are acting in this field, they have been suffering with all traditional ideas.
Yes, and not only awareness, as I was emphasizing, that you cannot compromise the principles of conservation. While doing that, right? While you doing repurposing. Otherwise, there are certain havelis which has been converted into hotels in Rajasthan. Some of them have been brilliantly done, and some of them have been extremely cliche and pastiche. It looks very, very bad. But they will say, I have restored a building. But they have missed the point. They have not actually restored the building.
Okay, fine. And you have set some models also in Imami foundations, and also that charts in the Serampore charts there. So you got some models already, and you could introduce here also in Bangladesh, and you have, I think,
I would love to with the participation, because I'm a firm believer that you cannot do something from outside. It has to be grown from within, right? No amount of international aid or help actually is of any assistance. The greatest assistance is that the capacity has to grow from within.
Yeah. So thank you, Manish, to see again.
Thank you for coming. Yeah. Any other, please? Anybody else? I could see Suganya. I could see Bonusridi, Mahfuz.
Yes, thank you for your nice presentation.
Ashish Pranaji. Yeah.
Hello, this is Mahfuz from Bangladesh.
Hello, sir.
Yes, thank you for a nice presentation.
Thank you.
And I want to know about the technical things that you applied in your projects, like your mortar and all such things that you incorporated in your projects.
Yeah.
Kindly just discuss a
little bit. I'm sure there will be similar questions. I'll club together and answer. Any more people? Basudeb Malik from West Bengal Heritage Commission. Many others. Lots of people. Durba. Suganya, I can see. Shekhorda. I could see Shekhorda. Sonia Di. Amira.
Sir, your presentation was wonderful.
Wonderful, Amira.
Thank you so much for showcasing some of your works.
Thank you. You liked it?
Yes, very much.
Same here.
Yeah.
Sir, it was very nice actually. Hello.
Yeah.
It was excellent. It was lovely. Hello.
Professor from...
Hello. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, it was a lovely presentation, but I would love to get into the details and know more about it. Particularly, the Denmark tavern was very nice, and the other 48B was like a miracle. I mean, unless it's seen, it cannot be really believed. That's it. Similarly to the other person who spoke, I would like to know about the details, how you went about.
I'll try to say something.
Maybe in another, you can also organize another talk or something to show us how you have documented everything and what are your real specifications of the mortar and other things which you have applied.
Sure.
Most corporates are not.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes.
And they like to come to cultural spaces because in the spaces which become.
Somebody asked my email address. My email address is consultcontinuity, all in one word, consultcontinuity@hotmail.com.
Okay, Monish, just tell me the real estate development. I am quite interested about real estate development. I'm also interested about heritage development. Okay. So you just tell me this post-pandemic time, how these two can be merged or how these two can be beneficial to each other. That's a very crucial problem will be cropping up the post-pandemic time.
Let me answer you in a little philosophical way. This pandemic is pushing us to think, to do certain things in a certain way. The developers also often get pushed by bigger developers. Smaller developers get pushed by bigger developers. And they try to think that, okay, these projects of this scale, I will not be able to handle. People from developers, national developers from Delhi or international developers will come and eat it away. So what will I do? So I compare this pushing factor either by a pandemic or by economic power to make you reflect of what you should do. And if you reflect of how you as a developer working in Calcutta, which is replete with old buildings, you should as a developer work with old buildings. That will be a very important aspect of a developer to work with old buildings. There are already some developers which are doing it in Calcutta. Imami is a developer. It has got a development sector also. Even they could think that this is worth the investment. I know Pradeep Chopra of iLEAD. I know Harsh Neotia. They are very keen on this way of recovering and gifting and creating commercial spaces by restoration. If you look at London, there are all kinds of regulations that you cannot develop this, you cannot develop that. And the architects and developers in London has done this wonderfully. They existed doing development and conservation. But what is most important, which I've been emphasizing in my presentation, that by doing development, you should be quite competent and aware of the protocols for conservation. Doing development in an old building without the protocols for conservation can be a disaster development.
Okay. Thank you, Manish.
Yeah.
Excellent presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Hi Manish Babu.
হ্যাঁ
আমি বাসুদেব মালিক বলছি।
হ্যাঁ, West Bengal Heritage Commission.
Yes,
right.
It was a wonderful presentation. We are very much enlightened to hear you. Thank you very much. But I would like to know, you were the architect of the government building at Serampore, particularly on the south gate, and
yes,
those two.
Yes. I could have shown that also. I know that we worked together on those buildings also.
Yes.
But there were already 100 slides, so, and there was a limitation of time. But I will definitely make an exclusive presentation on Serampore initiative with Bente, yeah, and with you maybe.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay.
Manish,
yes.
I'm really awestruck. Seeing your presentation is wonderful. Actually, it's one of the wonderful presentations on conservation I've seen so far. And
let me introduce you. That's my brother, eldest brother, Manish Chakraborti, who is just retired of a director of a R&D lab, DRDO lab from Agra, and now enjoys his free time effectively doing a lot of research and so on and so forth. I think he saw it for the first time because they always felt, what does Manish do as an architect? Yeah. So I think he logged in today. He told me that
I logged in because we have been interacting on so many other issues except the professional front of Manish. So I thought that let me have an insight on it. And I'm really, really proud of you, Manish, for this.
Thank you. Thank you.
And one thing, being a scientist from DRDO, and seeing a conservation work, which is really, really required for all adaptive reuse of all heritage buildings, one point of time. What I am trying to understand from the scientific point of view, when you do a structural audit of a particular building, will it have a bearing on how long this building will last before you take up the conservation for an adaptive reuse?
Yeah, these are all these techniques of assessing the durability and how long a building will last. These methods, non-destructive testings, load testings, and are all available, which are drawn today. The Leaning Tower of Pisa, which is the only source of economy for that country, has got a huge engineering that goes on to retain it in its leaning position, and all kinds of engineering is assessed. So they always monitor the rate of displacement, and there are all kinds of monitoring equipments that are installed there. So it's all there, and there's a lot of collaborative work between various disciplines. So conservation for pure is for important monuments and national and international and world heritage monument. A lot of money do get spent on understanding the durability and other things. And there are, so those are very much in vogue today.
Nice.
Like they've got laser techniques to know what is the amount of what should I say, porosity of the structure, which will enable you to deduce how weak or how strong the structure is.
Okay, very nice. I actually am very happy to see this. Yeah. And now I'm sure that you are not going around here and there all the time. not for nothing, some constructive work. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, Manish. Yeah,
Who is this?
wonderful. Hello.
Who is this? Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Subhadra Guha. I am an architect from Jadavpur University,
Right.
86 batch.
Right.
So I have been following your works, I mean, through Facebook and other accounts.
Right.
So so far it has been a very serious work on conservation, because I am yet to see somebody more serious than you, doing this sort of work. And more or less in the society till such date, I mean, conservation didn't have that much of appeal, maybe due to various reasons. But your works are so enlightening that probably I see there is a, hope of light at the end of the tunnel, that people are now gradually, turning to this idea. Instead of breaking a structure, let's not break it and do some conservation work.
True.
So I have a philosophical question to ask you. So have you ever been, I mean, had this chance had ever come to you while doing a conservation work, you are required to design something of your own, add to the structure?
Yes. As I
So
said, I added another floor, and you may not have noticed.
Okay, what I was trying to drive at is basically a separate structure in its entity within the same campus. So if it is a yes, then I would like to ask you, what is your take on something like, what they did in Louvre campus? I mean, are you against this, or I mean?
No. As I said in my, I think you missed that point. When you do something new to an old building, it should express its time and age and material. It should not hide it.
Okay, but
And
even
it should not hide it. It should try to respect the form, the scale, the character, but it should not be. It should not try to imitate it, right? And so it should stand apart, provided there can be somebody who is more better designer that can come in the years to come, so that he can unbolt your work and add his work, right? So there are a lot of things. In fact, we did a little smaller scale, even Denmark Tavern. One portion which was actually not there, we inserted a staircase over the existing staircase, and that staircase was done in steel, and the balcony was done in steel, while the rest of the building was from the original building material. So this combination is very welcoming, provided you respect the scale and form and character of the place. There's a certain amount of subjectivity there, but I think even the most technical subjects has subjectivity in it.
Okay, and another point is basically, I mean, your documentation should come out as in the form of a publication. I mean, it should come out in its form of a book, which should be, a milestone for the conservation students and for architects.
Yeah,
and
I'm looking for people to help me out in that.
Okay, which way?
I'm unable to take care of my loads and loads of external hard disks. Yeah, anybody else? Before I kind of answer those two technical questions, so to say.
Hello, one more work I would have loved to see is the Jodashako Thakurbari.
You would love to see Jodashako Thakurbari?
Jodashako Thakurbari.
Is it in the containment zone?
Oh, that I don't know. That I don't know. But in some future session, it would have been nice if I could see Jodashako Thakurbari.
Yes. Jodashako Thakurbari is a very important structure. Our Chief Minister might be is very keen that a good restoration and revitalization of that place takes place, because a large part of
I guess you have done a little bit of work on the baranda kind of thing, where Rabindranath used to spend a lot of time with his...
Yeah, but that was very, very small and more advisory. More advisory, yeah.
I agree with her, because you must do something on Jodashako Thakurbari and your dossier, so that it will open the lights of architecture inside the Shantiniketan.
Sure.
So,
yeah.
But you already did on Vidyasagar's I know you already did something on Vidyasagar.
Yes.
So
that is the project very close to my heart.
Yeah.
Anybody else? So before I kind of wind up by answering those questions about mortars and plasters and I think let me sum it up in Calcutta's context. I mean, most of the buildings that I worked on, the mortar, which is the binding material of the members which make walls, be it stone or be it brick, originally in Calcutta were mostly sand, shurki and lime. And these limes are not quick lime, they're shell limes, and they are actually prepared on site, and they are fermented, slaked properly, and then mixed with shurki for mortar and sand for plaster. So general proportion of mortar in Calcutta's buildings of say 1900 or 1850s is for plaster, it's 1:3. So high amount of lime in it. And the best part of lime is that the slaking of lime, unlike cement, which gains its maximum strength on the 28th day, lime slakes and carbonates throughout the life of the building. So an old building actually gains strength over a period of time, right? And we generally use 1:3 in the case of most of the mortars and plasters that we have done or tested are 1:3 plaster, and the mortars are 1:3 and 4. But nowadays we also use some kind of a modifications to it, but those are not absolutely necessary, but those are necessary when you are using or thinking about putting more load to a structure. Otherwise they may not be necessary. So some kind of a modified polymer modified mortar are often used in some buildings where the reuse is known from before. And for rising damp, we generally try to create a layer. There are different methods of arresting the rising damp. I know the famous conservation architect of the world, who is no more with us. I have the privilege of staying with him at his house cum castle in the UK, Dr. Bernard Fielden. He inserted a steel plate below the York Cathedral, Minster, to stop the rising damp. But there are now different methods. So you inject at a close spacing, say 150 to 200 gaps, and you insert a nanoparticle chemical, which has got a greater easyability to get into the pores and get solidified and create a hydrophobic zone, which actually repels whenever water tries to penetrate from the soil into the wall and into the upper area. But these are all very expensive material. Germany is the biggest producer of silicone, and often the project cost, it becomes prohibitive for a restoration project, which is looked upon as a thank you kind of effort, which I was trying to say otherwise. You need to get into more of a nation building exercise. Restoration is a nation building exercise, and therefore it becomes often very unviable to use such expensive chemicals. They become viable. Suppose you're doing a 40-story building and you use hydrophobic chemicals of silicone on the basement. That's fine. I mean, but it becomes some very minuscule percentage of the overall project cost, but they become very expensive. So there are different traditional methods which can be used. We have used both, and the bottom line is it has to be assessed how much, because we often overdo things, be it in buying shirts in a non-pandemic situation, or be it having food, or we always overdo. So I think we need to, one of the principal lessons that we should learn in this COVID situation is that we do essential things. We don't overdo things. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So I take permission to leave.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to everybody who could spare some time and be on my talk. And I'm very happy that you all liked it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.